this is not going to end well. This is very, very bad.
Paul and Karine were recently spotted together at Disney, which really wouldn't be that weird, but it is incredibly strange considering that they lost custody of their sons over a year ago. And the truth about what's really going on with Paul and Ken's custody battle and the current state of their relationship is just flat out insane, so most of us nay fiance followers already know that Paul and Karine obviously split up in December of 2021, and because of their unpredictably dangerous behavior, they both ended up losing custody of their kids. But what's been happening lately with their court case is just insane. So Paul and Ken's sons Pierre and Ethan have both been in the same foster home since the end of June 2022, and it turns out that their foster parents are actually Paul's cousin and her husband. But earlier this year, Paul and Kara's custody battle took a very unexpected turn because in May, Paul shared a bizarre update on his and Karine's legal issues to his Instagram story, and he claimed that Karine had really turned her life around and was about to regain custody of the boys. But what happened next was pretty unbelievable, because according to In Touch Weekly, Paul's cousin and her husband filed a motion in court on May 22nd to try to get permanent custody of Pierre and Ethan. And if the judge ends up granting the motion, it would mean that Paul and Karine would permanently lose their parental rights. But that's not all, because in the documents filed with the motion, Paul's cousin also made an interesting request. She asked the court to allow both Pierre and Ethan's last name, which is currently styled to be changed. Needless to say, Paul and Karine were extremely upset since then. Paul has posted a few digs at his cousin and her husband on Instagram, and he is just frustrated that they want to adopt the boys and permanently terminate his and Karine's parental and custodial rights. But what exactly have Paul and Karine been doing to regain their custody of their son? Well, Paul previously claimed that he legally wasn't allowed to be around his sons until they turned 18, but he also mentioned fighting for custody in court. So it's hard to know what is true, but when it comes to the actual efforts that he and Kay have made, their chances of getting back custody don't look great, because originally Karine had been allowed to have a 1-hour-long supervised visit with the boys once a week, and she and Paul were both ordered to take parenting classes. But to be honest, neither of them seemed to be focused on their kids. Instead of staying in Kentucky to work and attend court hearings in person, Paul went back to Brazil, and he was spending most of his time in a really weird way. So Paul was regularly filming himself doing TikToks with a 17-year-old girl, and he tried to clear the air by revealing that she was just the niece of his then girlfriend, who was only 18 years old. But pretty much everyone was convinced that he was still just as creepy as ever. And as for Karine, she decided to start dating again as well, and she was even in a relationship for a while with Josh Sider from The Bachelorette, who is notorious for being a clout chase and just attention-seeking type guy. And clearly, she and Paul have been prioritizing their dating lives and basically everything else instead of their 2 children. And I think that almost any parent in a similar situation would do their best to regain custody and follow the court's orders. But Paul and Karine may be running out of time to try to prove that they're actually fit to, parent their sons, because their custody case may be over soon, and that's for a surprising reason. And that's because, according to the adoption laws in Kentucky, after an adoption proceed begins, there's a time limit of 1 year when it can be challenged. And because Paul's cousin and her husband filed their motion in May, that means the countdown is on, and Paul and Karine already had 5 months to make progress in getting their lives back on track. But it doesn't seem like they've been able to show the court that they're capable of being healthy parents yet, and their time is running out. And in May, the motion that Paul's cousin and her husband filed could end up moving forward in court. After all, the boys have allegedly been doing really well in their care. Not to mention, it doesn't seem like Paul and Karine have been too worried about the case lately. Just recently, a Reddit user shared a pretty shocking photo of Paul and Karine to a night of fiance forum. So apparently they had taken a trip to a very popular tourist attraction together, which left a lot of people completely stunned. So believe it or not, Paul and Karine decided to go to Disneyland together, and in the photo of them at the California theme park, Paul was standing next to Karine, who was wearing a headband with many mouse ears. And not surprisingly, many people who discussed the sighting on social media were confused about Paul and Kin's relationship status, and almost everyone seemed to be in agreement that no matter what, their Disneyland trip was absolutely ridiculous, and Paul and Cora's decision to go to a family amusement park when they don't have custody of their kids is just ironic, but the fact that they seem totally unbothered by the ongoing court case makes the situation so frustrating. I mean, how could they possibly enjoy their time at Disneyland, where I'm sure they saw countless children having the time of their lives? Any other parent who had to fight to regain custody of their kids would probably have a complete breakdown in that type of environment. Not only that, but Paul and Kinney must have spent a lot of money on the trip, because the cheapest price for a ticket to Disneyland is currently around $100 per person, according to the park's website. When you factor in the airline tickets, and the parking fees, and the food and drinks, and whatever Paul and Kinney bought from the gift shop, it definitely adds up. And Kinney reportedly started working for UPS in March, but there's no telling if she's still employed or not. But she did start a GoFundMe last November to raise money so that she could hire lawyers for the custody battle, and so far Karine's GoFundMe has actually raised over $3,000, but she hasn't updated it at all, and it's impossible to know if she's used any of the money to pay for a lawyer. And Paul still doesn't seem to have a job at all, but somehow he's been spending a crazy amount of money lately. And Paul has recently been involved in a bizarre disappearance scandal, and he had allegedly gone missing while traveling to a very remote island in Brazil. And Kinney even shared a memorial post on Instagram that made it sound like he had in fact passed away. But what happened was just bizarre, so when Paul finally resurfaced about a week later, he claimed that he hadn't actually been missing at all, and he told TMZs that he just wanted to get away from everything, but didn't have cell phone service where he was at. And apparently he had a lot on his mind, including the custody case. But if Paul was really that concerned about his kids and ever being able to be in their lives again, why would he be back in Brazil? I mean, you would think that he would want to get his life more put together in Kentucky again, and at least attend the custody hearings. But what he's been doing over the last few months is just outrageous. And in July, another Reddit user claimed that he had just seen Paul and Kay together in Louisville at a mall. And if that's true, it means that Paul has been going back and forth from Kentucky to Brazil. So how on earth has he been able to afford all of that traveling? And Paul and Kin's choice to spend their money and time on a vacation to Disneyland during their ongoing court case pretty much proves that they're still very selfish, and at this point, it seems like they don't even care if they get no custody back of their kids anymore. And a couple days after the photos started going around the internet, Paul shared a ridiculous message on Instagram. He revealed that he and Kinney are not in a relationship, and she's supposedly been dating several different men. But that's not all, because Paul also wrote that he's been seeing a woman from Brazil, and he added that he and Kinney are only friends because they know that they're toxic while they're in a relationship together. But in the court's eyes, Paul and Kinney simply being in each other's lives must have a really negative impact on their custody case, because if it's true that Paul isn't legally allowed to be around his sons until they're adults, what is Kinney doing hanging out with him? I mean, she could literally be risking her chance of ever regaining custody of her kids by being so close with Paul. But neither of them seem to care, and it's absolutely unreal that Paul and Kin have been going on trips and spending so much money on themselves. They could be using that money to hire lawyers for their custody case, but apparently that doesn't matter very much to them at all. And it's really just heartbreaking that Ethan and Pierre have dealt with so much already. But to tell you the truth, it maybe is in their best interest that they're still in foster care, and hopefully Paul's cousin and her husband are able to provide the boys with all the love and care and everything else that they need. Especially since it's becoming increasingly clear that Paul and Kinney are not fit to be parents, at least not for now. But we'll just have to wait and see what happens next with Paul and Kin's kids and their custody case. But now you know that we've gotten into what's been going on with them. I want to know what you guys think. I mean, what do you think about Paul and Kai going to Disneyland together when they don't even have custody of their freaking kids? And what are your thoughts on how they've been handling their custody battle ever since Paul's cousin filed a motion to start the adoption process, guys? Definitely let me know in the comments below.